First question is about near the beginning of the webinar, we mentioned these weekly or monthly updates to keep customers engaged. So this question is asking, you said you've had success by doing yours once a month. Do you have any best practices based on what you've seen as to what cadence seems to work best? Have you tried weekly? I worry it might be too difficult to create content every week.
Yeah, I can take that question. So at On24, we run an event called the Webinar Best Practice Series featuring our VP of Content Marketing, Mark Bornstein, and he's given literally hundreds of webinars. It's wild. He's a bit of a local celebrity, actually. We recently ran the numbers and found that we have some people who've been attending for over 2 years for that webinar series. That webinar series is run once a month. So we have a fair amount of time to put a new version of best practices together each time. There is some repetition for sure between certain episodes, but we're always bringing in either new research or new customer examples to keep that fresh. We haven't tried weekly. I did mention Fidelity, who does a bi-weekly event, but one of the things that they do to help them make content is they bring on a different advisor for each episode. And so that advisor is typically speaking to their subject matter area. So one week it may be what's happening in the European market, and another week it may be another topic that's closer to home. So I think that's a good way to think about it. How many speakers do you have? What breadth of topics do you want to cover? And then another thing to help you give you more content is it doesn't all have to be specific to your product. It could be something that's happening in the industry or that is relevant to your audience because of their roles and the type of work that they do. And so you're bringing that to them as a way to give value back to your customers or your prospects, but it's not necessarily specific and core just to your company's product offering.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Olivia. We have another question about, we get a lot of people to register for our webinars, but less than half of them attend. How can we turn those registrants into participants?
I can take that one as well, Morgan here. First of all, the important thing to do is to set realistic goals around how many people are going to attend your webinar versus your registrations. We run an annual benchmarking report that shows the numbers across all On24 customers every year. So literally hundreds of thousands of webinars. And what we see is on average is typically about a third of people who register are going to attend the webinar. So that's just going to help set some expectations for you right there. But the other thing that really helps you get people to attend day of is a same-day reminder email with the login information. So you make it really easy for people to just hop right into the environment and join you. Typically an hour or 2 hours before the event is going to start is a good time to set the reminder. And then this isn't exactly the same thing as attendees, but if you want to increase your views to registration ratio, making sure that your webinar is available on demand is a great way to get some attendees after the event. It's just not realistic that everybody's going to have an opening in their day at the exact same time as your webinar is, and so making sure that, that your registrants can go back and watch the content when it is convenient for them is a great way to make sure that you increase your views. In fact, our benchmarking data says that about 33% of your views will come from on-demand on average, and so you could be missing out on 33% of your audience if you're not making your presentation available after the fact.
Exactly. What social channels do you find work best for webinar promotion? Like, are there any differences between Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn in terms of users being more receptive to webinars on those channels? I mean, I know from my experience, I could speak to, I feel like it is based on your audience. Like, it's kind of hard to answer that question because you kind of have to look at, okay, where am I seeing the trends with my particular audience? So for example, technology advisors, we have a Facebook, we have a Twitter, we have a Google Plus page, we have a LinkedIn, we have a YouTube channel. The most engagement I see is on Twitter. And that is, something that I've just learned through consistently posting to all these sites and seeing what our engagement levels are and how they're functioning within our clientele base. So At least for me, I think that's just based on the experience that you have with your clients and where they're most engaging. I don't know if you guys have had any different experiences, Olivia and Morgan.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we have Ayesha Curry, Steph Curry's wife. She actually just launched a really cool program around her homemade meal prep business. And for her, she gets a lot of traffic through Facebook because that's where her business page is located, and she engages a lot of fans on Facebook and also on Twitter. But she's not going to get a lot of people coming through from LinkedIn. On the other hand, if you're doing something that impacts a professional group, or you happen to have a professional LinkedIn group that you engage with quite regularly on specific topics, I know there's some that have over 10,000 users for financial services. That would be a great place to advertise a webinar that's going to appeal to that specific audience and get some more interaction there. So I think really you have to test it. I think when you're starting off, especially with a series, continue to promote on all channels and just see where you're starting to get the majority of that traffic, and then focus more of your efforts and your branding around that channel.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I see we are running a little bit over on time, but we do have one more question here. Do you find answering questions through the webinar like you're doing here helps increase the participation, and does that have any effect on the registration as well?
That's a great question. Olivia, do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, I know that Morgan touched on that a little bit. I would say that having your audience as involved as possible through any means, whether that's your resource list, whether that is answering questions, whether that is surveys, whether that is polls, by any means having your audience engaged is a good thing, right? Because me coming from a sales perspective, that means I get data. That means I get analytics. That means I can make my company money. So it is always a good thing, and I would definitely say that that involvement also helps keep them engaged and keeping them excited. So if they feel as though they're being heard, then there is a higher likelihood that they are going to continue to register and participate in your following webinars.
Awesome. Okay, we should end, but there's this one question that's left, and it's, I just think, really important to address, so I want to make sure that we answer this for our attendee. It's, do you see a higher response rate to an email from an individual as opposed to an email from the company?
Very good question. That's a very good question. I don't think I have seen enough data on this one to know for sure. I have worked at 3 companies where webinars were big for our marketing strategy, and we were continuing to test for all of them. We typically saw different results based on different webinar formats. So for really, like our webinar best practice series, for instance, the On24 has been running for over 3 years. Those emails are coming from the company, and it's seen as industry data and industry research that we're providing as a service. And so we primarily promote it that way. But then there's other kind of later stage events. We used to do a really interesting kind of group reference call at my last company, where we would bring on one customer who would be speaking to 5 or 6 late stage prospects on a webinar. And the idea was that everybody was highly involved with Q&A, and prospects were asking really pointed questions that they maybe didn't feel comfortable asking a sales rep, but they really wanted to ask an existing customer. And all of the invites for that would come through the sales reps. And we would typically get probably like a 50 to 60% conversion rate, where if the sales rep invited someone to one of these events, they would attend and be highly engaged through the course of that. So I think it kind of depends a little bit in terms of how you're positioning the webinar and what stage your audience is in the process. But I would try both strategies.
Yeah, I just to add to what you're saying, I think that's the ever wondering question is, which way is the best way to approach that? And I do think it is somewhat of a case-by-case what I've noticed with ours is if they know me, if they are already very familiar with our company, it can be either, and they see the tech advisor's email and they will open it because they know us. Um, it feels more personalized if it comes from me at that point. If they don't know me, I would say from what I've experienced, I tend to then default to the company, the email coming from the company, because I feel like it maybe seems a little bit more sincere than it coming from me, where they might say, oh, well, I don't know you. Why are you emailing me? As opposed to, okay, well, this is a company trying to reach out to me about something they think is important. So I've noticed more so if they don't know us as well, the company works better. And if they know us better, like you're saying, the individual sales rep that reaches out, they know that sales rep. They have a relationship with that sales rep. So they are going to respond to that sales rep. But if that sales rep were to reach out to somebody that they didn't know, it really wouldn't matter to that person as much.